Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing. My name is Trevor Blondeel. Spending 25 years in manufacturing, I discovered the real impact we have on turnover, communication, and the ability to manage change is how we show up. That's the essence of emotional intelligence. In each episode, we bring a guest or message to expand your skills, engage your people, and grow your organization. So let's jump in. As artificial intelligence and our technology continues to grow in manufacturing, I think the importance of mindfulness continues to be more important because we're talking about being more human in this technical world as we grow. And I have a friend of mine today, which I met from Leamington, Ontario originally, and now lives in Dundas, Emily Nichols. She works with organizations that want to strengthen the human skills we still need in this increasingly technical world. And she's worked with companies like PepsiCo, PPG, and improved products and processes from breakfast cereal to automotive paint and electrical steel. And welcome, Emily. So excited to have you here, my friend.
And I'm excited to be here.
So we met through the Speakers Association, through our Canadian connection. I'm living in Louisville, but we still got connected.
Yeah, that was amazing when you gave me your phone number and I was like, wait a minute, that's a 519 number. There's got to be a story there because 519 is the area code for Southwestern Ontario. That's where I'm originally from. Even I don't have a 519 number anymore, but you do.
Yeah, I still had my BlackBerry, right? And I didn't want to give that up either, but I eventually had to give the BlackBerry up because it just wasn't getting serviced anymore. I'm an iPhone guy now. But yeah, I just kept that 519 number still with Rogers living in Louisville. And it's a fun way to keep the Canadian roots. And yeah, even though I'll be this weekend, go back every month to go see my kids and parents and friends.
Awesome.
So I've had to get you on the podcast, Emily. So you speak to others, and we met through the speaking world. You're a true engineer with wonderful human skills. You're on this mission, and when did this all start for you? So when did you realize that, hey, I feel like an engineer, I love this, but hey, we need to have these human skills as well?
Oh gosh, I think, I had a really rude awakening about 1 year into my engineering career. So my first job out of university was working at Quaker Oats in Peterborough, Ontario. My task was to be a process improvement engineer, and I was also doing some small capital projects. And so in the process of being a process engineer, I had to, first of all, learn to get comfortable with spending lots of time on the shop floor. Because one of the things, as you well know, is that even though we have all these amazing digital portals and we can see data remotely, the very best way to know what's going on the shop floor is to be there. And if you want to be working on improving processes, you need to see how they're working. So first I had to get comfortable with spending more time on the shop floor, but I wasn't very comfortable with that at first. And so I would move through the plant, usually very quickly, very efficiently, right? Focused on efficiency. I did not know this, but amongst the hourly workforce, our machine operators, I was getting a reputation that I was a bit unapproachable, snobby. And when my first annual review came up, I was really surprised because you know what? I wasn't just getting evaluated on my technical skills. There was this thing called your people score at Quaker Oats, and mine was not a good one. And I had been a straight A student most of my life, so I was not very happy about that and resolved to fix it. So I won't say that my first motivation was humanitarian in nature. It was mostly that driving force achiever kind of personality that took me in this direction at first. But I've really come to realize that the technical skills tend to be overvalued. I think they are valuable. I'm not saying they're not, but we need to have an imbalance with human skills.
That's interesting. So a people score, and so often that we get promoted based on the accomplishments that we've had, and we get scored on these KPI metrics. Are we able to run a profit? Safety, of course, is can you run a safe area? Can you get high quality? Can you get this process to run at a certain efficiency? But say more on the people score, because we are human. Nobody in the rest of the world knows about this watch and what's going on except for me, but I want to go on this one walk because I want to close my ring. So how does that work with a people score?
Were you a straight A student, Trevor?
Well,
Now, the people score really surprised me because at that time in my career, I was a solo contributor. I was a process improvement engineer and I didn't have anybody reporting to me. Expected that
mhm.
my review would be based on my accomplishments, my ability to save the company money and improve processes and reduce waste and all those good things. But in fact, my evaluation came down to two scores. There was like a personal achievement score. I don't know what that side was called, and there was a people score, and they were worth equal amounts. While I achieved a 4 out of 5 on the individual achievement score, and I was happy with that because I had heard no one ever got a 5. You had to, I don't know, walk on water to get a 5. So a 4 was okay. But in my people score, I only got a 2. And I thought, well, that won't do. I've got to figure that out and fix that up next year. But also, why was it there in the first place? I wasn't leading a team. That gradually opened my eyes to the idea that we can get so much more done if we're supporting each other's goals, even if we're not technically accountable for them. It has formed a very big part of my speaking career. That is one of my keynotes. It's called What's Your People Score? And we
Ah,
talk about that and help other people have that same realization.
right on. So what's resonating with people now? Because I mean, you started with that. You talk about this area here. So what are you seeing the trends in manufacturing? Are you seeing with, because we just came from a conference, a lot of talk about AI, different ways that we need to use it. And we also see the issues with retention and recruitment, which really doesn't have as much to do with the AI side and the technical, and it's more like how are we connecting together? What are the trends you're seeing?
I don't think we're talking about it enough, but you're right. AI is a huge topic right now. And of course, being the technical beings that so many of us are, me as a professional engineer, we're always interested in what's coming down the pipe, technically speaking. However, we need to think about the people that are involved in the processes. And I don't think we think about it enough. And you ask about trends. Well, I think one of the trends is that the more and more automated reporting that we have, the more access to information we have on our phones. When I started in manufacturing, I was wearing a pager, just to give you an idea of the timeline.
Yes, I
So,
did too as well.
so we weren't looking at charts and graphs of production KPIs in our pockets at all hours of the day, all the time. It wasn't like that. And I think the more and more that that information becomes available, people think that's great. And it is great. You can access it from a distance. However, there are certain things that you really just can't connect to, observe properly, be a part of, unless you're physically present on the shop floor. And I think that's a lesson that's honestly never going to go away because there's always a tendency towards more and more technical solutions to the problem. And also, there tends to be this idea that as you move up in the ranks, you don't have to spend as much time on the shop floor, or you do have an office where you need to be at least some of the time or in meetings. And sometimes we devalue that time spent on the shop floor. And so I think this message of the importance of time spent with people, at the Gemba, the place where the work is being done, I
Mhm.
think this is a timeless message that's always going to be needed.
Well, it's interesting because as you do get promoted, maybe you have that office and you have to go to more meetings, which means you need to be more impactful with your time and more skilled. And often that isn't the area we're going to be focused on, but how can I connect better in that time that I'm on the floor or interacting with different people I don't get the opportunity to on a regular basis? So how can we be more impactful as we have less time available to do that?
Okay, do you want to hear some really, really simple and easy techniques?
Yeah, it is usually it's the easier ones that are the better ones.
Okay, so the first thing is what's on your feet, right? If
Yeah.
you arrive at work and you're wearing your office shoes or whatever, then you're not suited up for the shop floor, right? So my first
Mhm.
tip is you got to have those safety boots on or safety shoes, even if they're like the dress shoe version of safety boots. You got to have those on all day because that means that if somebody
Mhm.
needs you, if there's something to look at, you don't even have to think about it. That extends to the rest of the personal protective equipment, depending on what's required in your facility, hard hats, safety glasses. And this gets harder if you're in food manufacturing or pharmaceuticals, or you're in a clean room manufacturing environment because there's more stuff to put on, right? And
Sure.
so then there are more barriers to getting ready and getting out there. I've seen places where the executives don't have that little cubby hole to keep their whites, that they're supposed
Yeah.
to pull on over their clothes. And so there's all these things. But anyways, the simple thing, put those safety shoes on first thing in the morning, lace up those boots, be ready.
Barriers to entry, right? You're just removing them, Emily. And it's just kind of like, hey, if it's one more step, it's like I've heard that for people trying to go to the gym more, right? Lay your gym clothes out in the morning. There's a better chance you're going to go to the gym. And it just makes sense, right? Find some shoes that are comfortable. That's just going to make it easy for you to get on that shop floor. I love that.
Yeah, to be sure. Now, those people trying to take up a running habit, I don't recommend sleeping in your safety boots, but
That might be a little extreme.
that'd be a little extreme, but have them at the ready. Now, the other thing, this is going to be a tip that I'm going to guess you haven't heard before. And I know we don't have tons of time, so I'll try to summarize the story for you. So back in my Quaker days, my first job out of university, first job in manufacturing. When I went up to Peterborough to look for an apartment, the HR team said, "Here's this little slip of paper, take it around to the uniform shop and they'll outfit you." So I
Mm-hmm.
took this little piece of paper into the store and they looked at it and they said, "Oh, you're a salaried employee. Your uniform's over there." I got my striped
Yep.
shirts and my pleated pants and off I went. I was really surprised when I started working that the workforce was visually divided by what they wore. The
Yep.
salaried workforce had different uniforms than the hourly workforce. And so the fact that I had on the salaried work shirt sometimes came to my rescue. I mean, sometimes it gave me a little bit more credibility.
Mm-hmm.
But many years later, when I was joining a new factory, I noticed the same thing during my tour. And so when it was time to get the uniforms, I said, "Well, can I have my choice?" And
Mm.
yeah, like whatever you want. These were rented uniforms. So I said, "Look, I want the gray shirts that happened to be the same as what the hourly workforce wore, and it happened to have the name embroidered on the shirt."
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it was practical because it was a color that could get dirty. This was a steel plant. It had
Mm-hmm.
my name on it, so people would know who I was. And I just wanted to be dressed the same as everyone else because I don't like this idea of a visual class system. And one day, one of the machine operators said to me, he said, Emily, I it really means a lot to me that you wear this shirt."
Mm.
And I almost said, "Oh, thank you so much." But I stopped myself and I was like, "Wait a minute, let me find out what he means." I said,
Mm.
"Can you explain why it's so meaningful to you?" And he said, "It means that you don't think you're better than me."
Mm.
Yeah. So there are so many things we can do, before we even open our mouths to connect better with other team members, to connect better with people who are doing the work, to show them respect. It doesn't take any time at all.
Yeah. Yeah. So one is just wearing the shirt, but you didn't respond right away. You were curious and you were able to say, well, what is it about that? So you got to get to know that person more and get, well, what does make you think that way? And then that probably led to another conversation, right? Where, what's going on? There's probably something beneath that as well where you can connect better. Hey, what are the behaviors that are making you feel that way? And then that's definitely going to tie into the ideas of improvements, and that shop floor operator is going to have all the ideas that we're looking for.
Yeah, that's the important thing, right? That those who are closest to the work have knowledge that we cannot ignore, even as technical specialists and experts. And we need to have some humility about that, I think.
Yeah, so it's those conversations, right? Of like using that F word of feeling. Like the feelings are out there, and it's whether we want to dive into them or not. And instead of just kind of leaning and putting pressure on, hey, we got to come up with some continuous improvement ideas. Like that's not motivating and putting pressure on us to figure out this X number. Like, how do you feel about your process? What frustrates you? What's going on? How do you feel supported? What are the conversations that we can generate?
Yeah, there are so many. Um, I'm curious to know, can I ask you a question?
Yes, you can. This is a conversation, not an interview, Emily.
Well, I'm curious to know how you came to this way of thinking of that humility and wanting to find out how people are feeling or what's frustrating them, creating a better connection with people on the shop floor. Where did that come from for you?
Yeah, like my dad ran a nursery farm in Stratfordville, just south of Tilsonburg, and he's a previous guest on the podcast. He's a good leader, right? Like he didn't swear at people. He was demanding, but he engaged everybody that was there. I learned a lot about. I had a lot of buddies from high school that I would bring in, and we'd have our own little team there, digging trees, loading trailers on a nursery farm, and that really connected with me. It becomes, when you're young, it molds you. And then he ended up selling the farm, and it's a lot of risk, running your own nursery farm. And I like the lifestyle of the manufacturing world, and the fact of I didn't have to work all spring and summer. You could have time off in there if you're not a farmer. And then when I started going through the organization, I could see different behaviors, right, of my bosses and how they would put pressure on people. And it wasn't the swearing thing or anything like that, but it was more of a command approach, right? Like just you got to put the pressure on to get the results, right? And it started to become less conversational. I started to emulate the leaders that I had, and I became less connected to my own values. And that's when it started. And I got Travis Bradbury's book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. That was probably the first EI material that I really dove into. And then I started to realize that it was due to my own skill set that I was missing, that I was and emulating these other people. I started to lose focus on what was important. It really wasn't important to get promoted. How was I impacting the people I was with every day? And then I started to fight for those results, break some relationships, and really started to slip out of who I was. And it was like, okay, there's something wrong here with me in my own behavior. And that's where it was kind of like, instead of, this is my big thing. When there's a performance issue or things aren't going well, I say, whoo, Emily, you're getting late on that project. Not gonna be good for you if you don't hit Friday. I kind of walk away. And I don't know if I do that or not, but I know I definitely had some of that attitude where I really should have leaned in and say, hey, Emily, what's going on? Like, you're a PN, you're a smart woman, and I know that this work is important to you. But I don't see you hitting this Friday, and what's going on? How can I help? Because this must be hard for you.
Yeah, it's completely different to feel like some leaders think you can just apply more pressure. If people aren't meeting their deadlines, apply more pressure. And it's so refreshing to work with people who are instead asking, like, how can I make this easier? I really love working with clients and contractors. I've just recently been working with a branding company and a web developer. I love working with teams like that. They would notice if I'm getting stuck or, they were waiting for something from me. Like, hang on, what's making this hard? Like, how can we make this easier? And that's oh so valuable. Now, I am super interested to hear you say that you learned some of this back on the farm from your dad, because my origin story is pretty similar, actually, although it has this specific engineering component. So when I decided I was going to study engineering, I was telling my grandfather that. Now, he was a really big role model in my life. He had run the farm, and then we moved back. We bought that farm and moved back there when I was 8 years old. I loved being on the farm, but same as you, as I got in my teen years, I was like, this is a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Why I thought engineering would be easier. I often make a joke about that in my talks, like, farming is going to be too much work. So I took an engineering degree and then another one. What? Who does that? Anyway, I was telling my grandpa, like, hey, I've made my decision. I'm going to study engineering. And I thought he would be really excited and happy for me. And he instead responded with this kind of faraway look. And he said, I dealt with an engineer once. And I thought, whoa, I was ready to celebrate, but instead
Yeah.
I was getting a lesson. And it was this lesson that he'd been in touch with municipal engineers at the time that a bridge nearby was rebuilt. And there was some discussion about the erosion patterns around the bridge. And he felt like he wasn't listened to, right? His knowledge didn't matter, despite the fact that he was working the land right beside that creek.
Mm.
Every season of the year, he was there and observing it, right? So it doesn't matter in this instance who's right or who's wrong or what the objective truth is, right? What matters is that we show that we care what people think, that we appreciate their expertise, Certainly, as leaders and as engineers, when we ask for ideas, they're not all going to be good ideas.
No.
Some of them are downright terrible. But it's up to us to sift the wheat from the chaff and try to bring people along and explain as best we can the rationale for each decision that's being made. And that's why we have leadership positions. That's why we have engineering titles, because it's up to us to take all that information and make it work as best we can for as many people as we can.
And all it needed was just a little conversation with your dad and that engineer, just to have a little more conversation, just a little more listening. And there could have been information your dad had that could have been helpful, maybe not, I don't know. But it's just we get an opportunity with every interaction, right? And it's
Yeah.
how do you take advantage of those opportunities and connect? And the technical aspect will work itself out. AI is going to figure out a lot of the technical aspect for us, but it's not going to figure out, am I making this person feel seen, heard, and valued? Am I creating them with a mindset of mindfulness that they're going to want to share their ideas and be on board with this? So how about what's your advice now for women engineers that are growing? Because obviously you've been a successful female engineer, and we know the numbers are not as high as males. And what advice do you give to them?
All right, let's talk about the numbers real quick first, because a lot of your audience may not know that it's still so unbalanced in engineering.
Let's hear it.
Only 15% of practicing engineers in Canada are women. If we look at the manufacturing industry, the labor force is about 30% women. It's about the same in the US and Canada, and it has been stuck at about 30% for about 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people do ask me, as you just did, what's my advice for women in engineering? But if I'm being honest, it's actually the men that I'd like to address the most, because we're in a situation where the women are not the problem. We don't need to fix the women. The women are in many cases
Love that.
overachieving, overworking, and just doing everything they can to overcome the barriers in the system and the biases and things like that. I love to talk about inclusive language, and I have a TED talk on this, so of course I'm going to hit on that. What if we didn't have to be one of the guys? And some people will say, oh, come on, the word guys is gender neutral. I beg to differ. And it's not just a matter of semantics. Some people will say, it's just words. Actually, no, our worlds are reflected from our words. And so if we want to change the world, if we want to change the culture, if we want to change what a manufacturing plant feels like, so that more people can feel included, so that more people are excited to get involved in this industry, that's one thing that everybody can do, regardless of their leadership position, whether they have a budget or not, their gender, doesn't matter. Like, let's use inclusive language everywhere that we can, and then think about the ways that our language impacts the way the rest of the work gets done. So, for example, if you're thinking about how many people you need to do the work this week, maybe the weekend's coming, you need to call in some people on overtime. Like, all right, well, you're looking at your sheet. Okay, well, I'm going to need 6 guys here and 2 guys over there. And, these kind of words get bandied about a lot, right? And when you're thinking about that, are you really thinking about all the full spectrum of people that could do that job? When you're talking to the agencies and getting them to bring in temps because you're shorthanded now and you need to increase your workforce, are you talking to them about all the kinds of people that you want to bring in? Or are you just defaulting to whoever they send? And then if you're thinking about guys, manpower, these kinds of words, is your stockroom stocking the personal protective equipment in the full range of sizes that it's needed? There are shortcomings not only for women, but for bigger and smaller and curvier men. Like, this is a problem for everybody. But if you want to attract more women into manufacturing, these are some of the things that we have to fix. And that's why it doesn't matter where I go, I carry all my own PPE, because likely the stuff that they have for visitors is not going to fit me.
Yeah, interesting. I had a client and I had said, hey, we got to get the guys and girls together. And then she says, well, it's either guys and gals or it's boys and girls. And I was like, oh, and she said it with love, right? Because she knew that my intentions versus my perceptions, right? But that was an eye opener for me, right? Like, you're saying guys and manpower, and it does start with that. And I think it starts with, from another podcast episode that we had, was talking about just bringing in the entry level engineers or just entry level females into the industry, right? Because we know that, and we're running out of time here, but I got stories on how it's the women around me that made me a better leader, right? Because they were able to tell me, and because I was trying to connect with people better, and I just sometimes didn't know how, and I wanted to, right? It was difficult. But yeah, those definitely resonate with me. And our other friend, Patricia Fripp, is a previous guest, and she will tell you on that episode, words matter.
Words absolutely matter. And I would say, like, let's take that one step further. You said, guys and gals, let's take that one step further. We don't need to create a binary with our words either, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a big proponent of even being creative with your words, making up a new word. I mean, whatever you need to do.
We need lots of people. So if we want to see a change in others, it's got to start with us. So I love that. Emily, what do you want to leave the listeners with today?
I want to remind your listeners, because many of them are in manufacturing, I just want to say that we often get caught up in this time is money mentality. We inadvertently end up thinking of ourselves as machines, and just to remind ourselves that, hey, we're people first. Even the technical people among us, we are technical people, but we are people first. And we have to keep reminding ourselves and coming back to that and softening a little bit towards ourselves and towards other people so that we can connect better.
Softening. I like that. We don't need to be harder. And then how do they follow you? What's the best way to connect with our listeners to connect with you, Emily?
Yeah, I'm so excited to announce that I've just recently incorporated and renamed my company. So we are Connect Better Inc. You can find us at connectbetter.today and on socials at Connect Better Today.
All right. We'll have those in the show notes. And thanks so much for coming on, Emily.
Yeah, great to be here.
Hey folks, appreciate you taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone. Haven't subscribed yet? Do it now. Remember, if you want results, the key is increasing your awareness of how you show up.